Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to review this sword for you right here. It is the Albion Alexandria Type 18C sword, a big, giant, cool-looking, awesome monstrosity of a sword, and I'm gonna tell you about it. But before I do, you should know a couple things. One, I've already made some videos about this sword, and I'll put a link in the description down below so you can see them if you'd like, where I compare it to a Ronin katana war sword. It's not a katana, but anyway, the name for the namesake of the sword is a different Type 18C reproduction sword. These are relatively uncommonly mass-manufactured swords or reproductions available today, so I compared it to the other one that was available, or from a different manufacturer anyway. Additionally, you should know I am not a practitioner of historic European martial arts, so as you see me swing this thing around, as you hear me talk about it, just know that it's from an enthusiast who doesn't know much. And the last thing you should know, and probably the most important thing, well, maybe me not knowing a lot of things is the most important thing, but it's also, as you see video of the overall sword, know that I got it secondhand. It's a pretty good representation. It's overall in very good condition, but it does have some things like it has a coin inset in the pommel area. I don't think that dramatically affects the dynamics of the sword. In the previous video I did, I added some weight to the Ronin katana's blade. I added a pound at the end of the pommel, and it didn't change things as dramatically as I would have expected. Anyway, the long and the short of it is, I think it's still pretty representative. As you see me swing it around, that this coin hasn't dramatically affected things. The thing that may be impacted, as this is supposed to be a very wicked cutting sword, is that it's secondhand, so who knows how diminished the edge has been from shipping or usage. The previous owner, I don't think he used it very much, but in any case, I've swung it, and I didn't have the best luck in cutting with it, despite the fact it's supposed to be a prolific cutter. But I'll talk about that more in the actual review. On to that part now. Now, I'd like to be able to give you some sort of historical overview about this sword and why it's significant and how prolific it was and when it was used and by whom and or how obscure it is or how random it is, but I don't have that information. What I do have is the information on Albion's website that tells you the price and kind of the general history, at least in some sort of sales blurb about the sword and why it might be interesting to you, but I don't have much other research. If you do, throw it in the comments down below. If you happen to know any sources where more information is available at a Type 18C sword or this general typology, then I would certainly be interested in reading it. Anyway, I don't have much, and I'm not a great student of history, but if you happen to know, throw it in the comments down below. I will put the link to Albion's website in the description down below, so you can at least see that if you so choose. What I can tell you about, though, from a more modern context, is what I perceive the uses to be of this type of sword now. Well, apart from it just looking cool hanging on a wall, if you want to buy one, it certainly looks neat on a wall. It's big and imposing, but despite that, it actually is relatively nimble. More on the dynamics a little bit later. The modern context that I can think of is really that it's seen as, well, a relatively prolific style of blade to do cutting with. If you're entering a cutting tournament, there are certainly more knowledgeable experts in this type of field than I am that have said that the Type 18C, particularly the Alexandria and Principe from Albion, which are the Type 18C blades they offer, have a distinct advantage in cutting tournaments. Now, this one's edge is not great, though. If you're entering a cutting tournament and cutting tatami mats, a really, really keen edge is important, and it's no surprise that you might need to touch up the edge, though I didn't do that, so my cutting did not really excel as a result, but I'll talk about the cutting later. Anyway, the point is, this sword is supposed to be a relatively prolific cutter, and from a modern context, if you're training in historic European martial arts, it might not be the best tool, despite how nimble and agile and how great it cuts, but at the same time, if you're entering some sort of tournament, it's supposed to be a great sword for that. Anyway, that's what I see it used for and talked about right now, apart from just being overall very imposing and cool looking. Anyway, I'm going to talk more about the overall build quality and ramble on about that now. So, this one obviously has a coin stuck on the inside here. Normally it wouldn't be there. I don't know where this is from. The previous owner put that coin in there, but it has an attractive look. Peen block, the peen is nice and even. Very clean and well executed. I note that there's not a bunch of hammer marks or divots around here. However they got it on here, it appears to be pretty well done. There's also a little bit of slope and slant. It's not necessarily apparent at first, but this pommel has some dimension, which doesn't initially come out as you look at it. Where it meets up, okay, well, we can see that there's no kind of schmutz along the base of the pommel here. Sometimes those get a little ratty, rusty. This one actually seems pretty clean. From this angle, you can almost see the dimension a little bit better on the pommel as well. The edges are all chamfered, or at least, they appear crisp, but at the same time, I don't hurt myself when I move it around. It's very comfortable to hold. The guard is black and has a hexagonal shape to it. It's a pronounced ridge, several leather risers. It's very easy to index and identify where's where. The sword is very sharp, and I feel like I'm going to cut myself while I do this. It's difficult to tell where the seam is, but it is along this side right here. I can make it out, but it doesn't come up under my fingers. There's no ledge of any kind. Kind of what you expect to see from Albion. Along this side where the guard meets the cross, again, no schmutz, very clean transitions, very nice. In terms of the shape of the guard, you can see if participation happens here. It doesn't taper very much one way, but it does this way. These risers kind of help you feel where your hands are. Cross guard is clean, well executed. It looks an awful lot like the piece it takes historical inspiration from. By venture, I guess this one's probably a little bit more symmetrical and even. I mean, there are imperfections if you look closely at this. They're not terribly hard to find, but it's quite a bit more even than a lot of the historical swords in terms of symmetry. I'm rambling. Another detail here, this hexagonal ending on the quillion here. It expands. It's a very simple design, but it just expands into something bigger. You can see how even it is. And then lines up over here on the other quillion. You can see there. Straight, even, very well done. Very narrow gap in the crossguard where the blade meets. It's certainly present. It's a millimeter in some spots, but pretty consistent and small. Hallmark of Albion's manufacturing. You can see Albion's mark here along the blade. The historical Alexandria sword, or the Harriet Dean sword, has some writing in this area. One side. Blade has a simple satin polish from Albion. You can see the tip is not terribly small. Seems almost slightly reinforced, which is good. Central ridge is apparent, but not terribly crisp. It's a very subtle ridge in the center. It's not terribly apparent, but there is a distal taper here. It's tough to make out in the camera. Blade has, well, I'll put the dynamics in, you'll be able to see that. What I say doesn't really matter very much. cutting didn't really go all that well. In a nutshell, I was cutting, I found my stride in the tatami mat eventually, but it didn't really cut very easily. I wouldn't say the sword did the work for me, and this is supposed to be a prolific and amazing cutter. I don't know if it's the preferred thing in terms of competition cutting, but it has the profile to be just a really devastating cutter, and it didn't do the work for me the same way other swords have. It cut through, but I think it's really a mixture, certainly one, of my skill, and two, of this edge. It's sharp, but not really all that sharp. If I put a keener edge on it, I'm sure it would move through those mats quite a bit better. It felt like the geometry was there. It felt like it could be a better cutter than it is, but it's really just the edge profile. I can kind of move my hands around it, and that's not a recipe to move through used Japanese tatami. Anyway, the profile's there. It's easy to move around. I think I can swing it for days. It's very comfortable despite its very imposing size. The other thing I noticed is when this was wet, it was really slippery and tough for me to grab onto. My hand kind of slipped away, even though my finger was resting kind of in the little center area here, but it slipped off. This was actually pretty uncomfortable while it was wet. I dried it off, and then it wasn't so bad, but if it were riddled with blood, or in this case cucumber juice or something, wasn't as easy as I expected. It created an obstacle that I wasn't anticipating. Anyway, cutting, not overly enthusiastic. Moving it around though, dynamically, great. And the edge could use a little work, though I think that's come to be an expectation for many Albion swords. Alright, well, I better oil this before it rusts. Now, I've had a little bit of time to reflect on the performance of the cutting, and the thing I need to note is that the edge isn't sharpened. And, well, in effect, it's sharp, but not as sharp as it could be. I didn't hone the edge, and if I'm going to cut used Japanese tatami mats, which are a little bit more difficult than perhaps some other types of tatami mats, and I'm going to compare it to Japanese katanas, which I cut with, which have a very keen edge, then this isn't necessarily a fair comparison. If I had honed the edge, I'm relatively confident that it would have done much better, but I didn't, and I'm not going to. Now, the point is that inexperienced hands using the blade, a relatively dull edge, and it still cut as well as it did, I think it's actually a testament to how effective a cutter this is. I'm not going to sharpen the blade because it would diminish the value of the sword, and after cutting with it and using it, I think I'm actually going to sell the sword. Part of that is due to this pommel. Now, you saw in the video, I kind of dried my hands off. I actually kind of hurt my hand a little bit moving this sword around. When I swung it, my hand went around and I caught my finger on the little pommel area here. That might be inexperienced, but I see that the Principe has a slightly longer handle and a fishtail, and I think if I were to have a Type 18C from Albion, I would rather have that. Now, I don't like the guard on the Principe, but I would prefer a sword that I would be comfortable swinging around and like moving around that has similar dynamics. As enjoyable dynamically as this sword is, I just didn't like it very much. And as cool as it looks, well, it's an expensive wall decoration, and the Ronin katana at $450 suits that need for me about the same as this one does, at least if it's going to sit on the wall and look pretty. Now, in an earlier video, I also noted that I would rather have 3 of the Ronin katanas than 1 of these at $1,375. This is a lot of money. And the Ronin at $450 is a little bit more approachable if you want a Type 18C. I will note, as a training tool, this dynamically is just a different animal altogether in terms of how it moves around, how precise it is, how easy it is to handle. This is a lot more comfortable, and if you wanted a training tool, I think this would certainly be the animal to go for. If you want a competition cutter, then be prepared to sharpen the edges, though that's par for the course for Albion type swords. The main point is that if I wanted a wall decoration, the Ronin katana is going to suit the need. If you want something for backyard fun and you're not particularly interested in the historic accuracy or any of that kind of stuff, I think the Ronin does the job at a much more approachable price, but it's not the same thing to move around. So do I think it's worth $1,375? Well, that's a lot of money, but this is a lot of sword. And if you like the sword, if dynamically it suits you and you like the decoration or some feature that it has, you can be confident that buying something like this from Albion will net you a very good and handsome and good quality sword that does what it's supposed to do. To me personally, though, I would rather have the Principe, given the reasons I outlined earlier, but that doesn't mean that this sword isn't a good product or isn't worth the money. It's a lot of money, and if you don't have it to spend, I don't know that there's another sword out there that gives you the same type of training tool this does, but the Ronin, if you want something less expensive that looks similar but isn't quite dynamically the same tool, that's also an option, though. I think it's a good sword. Albion makes great products. They ask a lot of money, but they give you a lot in return. And if you value those things, the little nitpicky refinements that Albion seems to get well, or the overall construction quality or consistency, then be prepared to pay the piper for it, but I certainly think it's worth it personally. Anyway, that's all I have for you. I hope the video has been useful. As always, cheers, and thanks for watching.